special committee or a special joint committee. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. All right, so the point of this motion is to demonstrate that this bill implicates a number of areas of law. It should therefore be considered. Some things that I'm thinking about, we talked a little bit about last week, are that you can only infringe, and this is now 24 pages of infringement. You can only infringe on such a right if it has some sort of law enforcement benefit. And now we're going to look at putting CPW in there. And I'm not sure CPW has the law enforcement, and do we want to put them in a law enforcement category? Now, so just some things, I don't know. Maybe they do have law enforcement and we should do that. But you also have things in here in our Constitution, quaint little document, that talks about fingerprints, that the fingerprints have to be returned to you. So now you're going to do fingerprints as part of this background check of law-abiding citizens for whom you don't have any reason to suspect anything other than the wanting to exercise their right to self-defense, and deprive that for some period of time whereby their fingerprints are probably taken and that biometric. So now what happens to those fingerprints? Because the state says, the Constitution says they have to be returned. But if you put those fingerprints into a database, how are they returned? So we need to talk about this in a joint special committee. We need to explore all of these things before we put more bad legislation into the works. We need to talk about what the overall implication is on the counties, the municipalities. We know at least it's going to be $50 million. Do they have that in their budget? Do they have that to work? And they're in their budget. I mean, that's something for which I think we should really sit down in a joint special committee and figure out how this is all going to work. Now, if I were somebody who owned a handgun or some sort of personal self-defense, then I'd probably be inclined to, I don't know, say, initiate a lawsuit. I could do that for $250 at the court for any time that I would go down to the sheriff's office, apply for my permit, to apply for a permit, to be permitted to permit a purchase under this bill. And then I would institute a lawsuit to say I should have this determination to have the right, my Second Amendment rights, my right to self-defense, returned to me. Now that's going to clog up one more part. So do we have the judiciary that can handle this? What's their budget going to be when people decide that they want a timely trial when their rights, because you can't deprive someone of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. So I think we need a joint special committee to actually go through all the inner workings of this bill. Now, we could have asked the people of Colorado, 95% of them or so are opposed to this. We do have a handful of specialist disarmament groups that are opposed, well-funded. But what is the impact here on the policies and programs of CPW and Parks and Wildlife? Sure, apparently it sounds like they want in on this action. Is their budget going to increase? Or is this just part of that the division may do the necessary things to make this work, or they may not do the things to make this work? What's their plan? Is their plan just to say, nah, we can't do it? I think we need to know that they have a reasonable, rational, workable plan. This bill, all it does is say somebody come up with a plan. Somebody maybe come up with a plan. Law enforcement strains, both in process and on the citizenry. What is the implication going to be? We had a chat with the police officers right now. They're underfunded. Are we going to, in this defund the police movement that is ongoing, where we want to get rid of law enforcement, yet we keep adding laws and laws and laws and laws, and then we make laws to create criminals out of law-abiding citizens? What's that effect going to have? That's why we need a special committee. We need some people, now that we've got 24 pages, we need some people to actually sit down and work this out before we turn it into law. Otherwise, we're just turning it into law by turning it over to rulemaking agencies, executive agencies. We're asking the executive, once again, to make the laws on the people of Colorado. What are the economic considerations linked to harming and eliminating whole industries? We know that this is going to have a massive effect on industries. Is it going to have an impact on crime? No. The major impact on crime is called repatriation. That's going to be the major impact on crime. Judicial impact from increased crime, new crime, thought crime, future crime. More crimes than ever before, better, stronger, faster. Creating more crimes than ever before. The General Assembly. No. More fees, more crimes. What's that going to do to the judiciary? We just had to add millions of dollars to the judiciary to process this. Now we're going to turn more citizens of Colorado into criminals, which is why we need a joint committee. What are the educational impacts? What are the educational impacts? We have about 25% of our population that's graduating from high school because only 80% graduate. The last time I looked at it, the average is about 25% meet or exceed the standards to continue. Can they pass? Do they lose their right of self-defense because they can't pass a standardized test at 90%? A group of people that have said standardized tests are racists, we're going to put out a standardized test that has to be passed at 90%? And what happens when that test is not passed at 90%? Do they need to go back in the queue in the permissive state to ask more mother may I of the nanny state to say, I would like to reapply because I didn't pass at 90% the first time? What are the implications of that? What are the implications of the fees? Do you get your fees back? If you don't pass with 90% the first time, well, the work was completed. At fees, taxes. What are the taxes? What are the poll taxes? What are the Second Amendment taxes? The Second Amendment, the poll tax, was used as a way to keep people from voting. And it was justified. They said, well, you're not really paying to vote, you're paying for the ballot. Which is why we need a special committee. We need to talk about this. What's going to happen? What's going to happen when somebody is denied? And you say, you know what, you're just too poor. You're too poor for self-defense. Wow. And then we say, oh, well, you're at a disadvantage because you went through the public school system and you can only you can't read at 12th grade level and pass that. Then what? What are the implications? What are we going to do? What bills are we going to have to pass on top of this in order to make this workable? That's why we need a special committee. There's lots of things to consider in this, not just ramming through another bill to make some well-funded constituencies feel good about disarming the citizens of Colorado, which we know will statistically do nothing but form the basis of forming more laws to do next year or even this year. So we have an unworkable law. We feel it's an unworkable law. So a joint special committee should be able to, you say it's a workable law. So a joint special committee should be able to sit down in an afternoon and go, this is how it's going to work, this is how much it's going to cost. We don't know how, right now we're saying we don't know how much it's going to cost, we have no idea how much it's going to work, but this body wants to impose it on the municipalities and somehow say we're sort of something about home rule.
Representative DeGraff, you have 40 seconds remaining.
There's that 40 seconds again. So I think we need to send this back to a special committee because I think we need to know the workability of this law. We should not be passing laws. We should not be voting something, passing it to find out what's in it. That was a bad idea then. It remains a bad idea.
Representative Richardson.